Today on CityCast Chicago, the results are in and we know which two candidates for mayor will face each other in a runoff in April. We're breaking that down, plus the aldermanic races that have been decided and which ones are still up in the air. It's Wednesday, March 1st. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I'm here with lead producer Carrie Shepard and producer Simone Alisea. It is 6 a.m. If you want more detailed election results, head over to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, at chicago.citycast.fm. But first, a runoff. Chicago has a two-round system and has had it since 1999, meaning if a candidate for mayor doesn't get at least 50% of the vote, we head to another runoff between the top two vote getters. And in this election, that was former CPS CEO Paul Vallis, who took the top spot with 34% of the vote, followed by Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson, who ran second at 20% of the vote. Oh my God, lead producer Carrie Shepard, we've been talking about this for months. Are you shocked that we are in a runoff?
I am not shocked that we are in a runoff, Jacoby. I am also one of the people who's not totally shocked that it is Vallis and Brandon Johnson who super surged in the last couple weeks here. I guess I'll be frank. I didn't think the incumbent Lori Lightfoot would be third. I thought maybe U.S. Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia would come in third. But Vallis, doubled Lightfoot's votes, and she conceded fairly early-ish last night, if I recall. So, which seemed like the right noble thing to do.
I didn't expect her to come out that early.
I didn't either, but not surprised on the runoff, no.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, we've had this system since 1999, and it's become more common, right? 2015, 2019, and now 2023, and we're headed back to another runoff. Simone, can you break down what voter turnout numbers looked like yesterday?
Yeah, voter turnout looked pretty in line with what we've seen the past few mayoral elections. As of last night, we had about 32% turnout across the city, but there are still more than 97,000 mail ballots that still need to be counted. So some of these numbers that we're going to talk about today, they're going to shift a little bit as those returns get counted over the next week. In the ward with the highest turnout was the 19th ward on the southwest side, sort of Beverly, Mount Greenwood area. They had over 55% turnout.
Wow.
The ward with the lowest turnout was the 16th ward, which is sort of West Englewood, Chicago line, had just 19% turnout in that area. That is also in line with what we've seen in previous elections. It's tough to do it like an apples to apples ward comparison because of redistricting, but very similar numbers, same high and low areas of voter turnout in 2019 as well.
Yeah. When the dust settled on the midterm election, so much of the focus was on Lightfoot versus Garcia, right? Just a few months later, and now we're looking at Vallis versus Johnson, which to me, I think is a really important thing for people to pay attention to because like in 2019, Vallis only got 5% of the vote and Brandon Johnson wasn't even on people's radar. And now they're going to be facing off to be the next mayor of Chicago. Carrie, can you tell us a little bit more about Paul Vallis?
Sure. Jacoby Vallis, it's a good point you mentioned because he has been somewhat of a perennial candidate, maybe not on the Willie Wilson scale, but he has run for several offices, and Chicago mayor would actually be his first elected office if he's to win in April. He in Chicago, we know him mostly as someone who ran CPS. He was a CPS CEO in the mid-90s and then went on to run other school districts across the country. Real quick, we've talked about this on the show before. He really became the quote-unquote law and order candidate. His, if you saw his speech last night, it's his banner was Paul Vallis, public safety, public safety, public safety. It was all about Chicago, keeping Chicago safe. And that was actually one of the first things he said in his speech. Let's take a listen.
Public safety is the fundamental right of every American. It is a civil right. and it is the principal responsibility of government. And we will have a safe Chicago. We will make Chicago the safest city in America. And it will not only come from providing the police with the resources and the support they need, but from building the bond between the police department and the community. So we have true community policing in the greatest sense of the word.
So that's Paul Vallis, who really became the Law and Order candidate. But actually last night in his somewhat acceptance speech, acceptance of the runoff, he really was trying to stress that he has been a quote unquote lifelong Democrat, because that was what Brandon Johnson, as a progressive, and a lot of the other candidates were coming after in the campaign, is saying that Paul Vallis isn't a true Democrat. So that was something he was trying to send a message to all the voters last night, Paul Vallis.
Yeah, he's constantly been remarked as like a Republican in Democrats' clothing. So I'm interested to see how Johnson sort of focuses in on that line of rhetoric, because again, right now Vallis is only 16% away in terms of percentage of the vote, and I imagine he's going to soak up some of those possibly Willie Wilson voters. Simone, can you tell us a little bit about Brandon Johnson? Because again, when we were having this conversation 3 months ago, I think most people thought it was a foregone conclusion that Brandon Johnson would, get some of that progressive vote, having secured early endorsements. But I don't think a lot of people saw this from Brandon Johnson. Can you tell us a little bit more about who the Cook County Commissioner is?
Yeah, very impressive run. Cook County Commissioner, as you mentioned, a former teacher. And I think when he first entered the race, one of the lesser known names. But he got the endorsement and the financial backing of the Chicago's Teachers Union, which that was huge for him and really kind of propelled him to become the progressive candidate in a race where a lot of candidates were kind of vying for that position, and he emerged as that person. Sort of policy wise, has been an advocate for things like treatment not trauma, reopening mental health clinics, finding alternatives to policing in terms of violence prevention, and things like that. In his speech, Johnson sort of talked about being like a change maker for Chicago. He really is trying to paint this vision of Chicago that is, where everyone's got affordable housing, where people feel safe, and has this big vision for what Chicago would look like.
We get to turn the page of the politics of old. Because with our voices and our votes, we've come together as one city to say that we deserve a Chicago that is better, stronger, safer for everyone. No matter where you live, no matter where you look, what you look like, you deserve to have a better, stronger, safer Chicago. Whether you live in Jefferson Park or Morgan Park, or McKinley Park or Gage Park or Humboldt Park, you deserve a better, stronger, safer Chicago. A city where you can thrive regardless of who you love or how much money you have in your bank account. A city that respects the workers who keep it running, that actually values them by building new affordable housing.
Interesting enough, when we were doing our sort of setup, we kind of talked about a Vallis versus Johnson, because seemingly it seems like the most two polar opposite candidates coming out of that sort of crop of four frontrunners. And now that we've gone from 9 to 2, we're expecting to hear some big names who have been quiet so far will speak up. Carrie, who do you want to hear from now? And do you expect, one, a ton of new money to flood into the field, a ton of new endorsements? And what do you expect that impact will have between Vallis and Johnson?
Yeah, I wanted to hear, going into last night, I want to hear kind of how the big Democrat heavy hitters, so we're talking Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who famously did not have the best relationship with Mayor Lori Lightfoot. I wanted to hear, but is an important relationship. Let's remember that the governor and the mayor work together very, very closely and will continue to, especially with the casino coming to Chicago. I want to hear from Cook County President Tony Preckwinkle, a leader in the Democratic Party, who actually pushed Lori Lightfoot into a runoff in 2019. But this is the question that you guys alluded to this already. It's to see where these other 7 candidates, where are their voters going to go? So we've got our Chuy Garcia voters. Are those, we assume those are sort of the second tier progressives. Are those automatically going to go to Brandon Johnson? But Willie Wilson, very conservative rhetoric on the campaign trail. Do those go to Vallis? And also, I don't know, Lightfoot's, where some of Lightfoot's, voters, where are they going to fall? So I'm really interested to see who this other 7 candidates are going to endorse and then push their voters, the votes they got, into one of these 2 candidates.
Yeah, at the time of us recording this, Mayor Lightfoot had secured 87,000 votes. Congressman Garcia secured 70,000, and Willie Wilson close to about 50,000 votes. And so when you take those numbers into account, just between those 3 candidates, wherever their voters choose to go, will sort of make or break the runoff for, the next mayor of Chicago. I'm always looking for local stories from local folks, and I've got the next podcast you have to add to your queue. You Didn't See Nothing tells the story of Leonard Clark, a 13-year-old black boy who was beaten into a coma by a gang of white teens in Chicago back in 1997. But it's also the story of host and Southsider Johann Slakor, who couldn't stop thinking about this hate crime even after the media coverage turned to stories about reconciliation and racial healing. The series from the Invisible Institute and USG Audio is part investigation and part memoir as Slakor unravels how this case rippled out into his own life. Trust me, you're gonna want to binge this one. So subscribe to You Didn't See Nothing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Simone, again, we've heard so much from Paul Vallis throughout this, who has really stamped public safety as his go-to issue, the thing he's hanging his hat on. Whereas even just over the last few weeks, we've seen Brandon Johnson making the rounds, getting endorsements from folks like Anjanette Young, from artists in Chicago, from major unions. But do you think we'll learn anything new over the next 5 weeks from either Vallis or Johnson, or is just this their opportunity to sort of further cement the platform that they've built to this point?
I think it'll be a really interesting question to watch of how much do we see tactics change in an effort to get those votes that Carrie talked about, in an effort to get those Chuy votes, to get those Lightfoot votes, to get those Wilson voters. It's worth noting that in the last 2 runoffs, the first round leading candidate won the election. In 2019, Lightfoot went from getting 17% of the vote in the first round to 73% in the runoff. But then again, we've only ever had 2 runoff elections, so who knows if those numbers will hold. I think what is that sort of battle for the middle ground in Chicago is going to be sort of the big thing to watch in this race.
Yeah, I am interested to see Paul Vallis, just listening to his speech yesterday, sort of try and pull back a little bit while Johnson tries to go harder and harder, painting Vallis's time as a CPS CEO as a failure. And I imagine Vallis will push back and say, if Johnson is mayor, CTU is going to be running the 5th floor at City Hall. And so people have painted this as the FOP versus the CTU, and that is extremely reductive. But, those are 2 of the most powerful unions in our city. city, and they both have made their decisions at this point on who they support. So the next 5 weeks will be a lot of you love the police and you want to defund the police, going back and forth from the two. And we'll see how that plays out.
And also, anything could happen between now and April 6th, too. I just want to say, like, some big event could happen. Something crazy could happen on the CTA. We could have some natural, crazy blizzard. Who knows what'll happen between now and April
Simone,
6th.
don't even put it out there.
Why would
just
you
saying.
say such a thing? Now we just need transition music to cleanse the palate. In addition to voting for mayor, we obviously had to choose the 50 individuals who will make up our city council moving forward. We will not cover every single aldermanic race from last night. Again, head over to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, where Sydney Madden has been working tirelessly to bring you the most detailed and up-to-date election coverage. Carrie, I want to start with the first ward, though. Can you tell us who is in the runoff coming out of the first?
Sure. So going into the runoff is the incumbent, Daniel Espada. He's a progressive part of the Democratic Socialist Caucus in City Council. And he is just below the 50% threshold. So he's going to face attorney Sam Royko in the runoff. Royko, a Westtown candidate who really talked a lot about crime in the neighborhood and said that he got into the race after his girlfriend was carjacked in their neighborhood.
We had out of the 50 elections, 14 of them for city council are headed to a runoff. Most incumbents were safe. It is important to note that 3 of the 4 Lori Lightfoot appointees are headed to runoffs, and only 3 incumbents outside of that group are headed to runoffs as well. Over in my neighborhood of the 4th Ward, again, Sophia King running for mayor. We knew we were going to have a new alderperson, and I was a little shocked last night. Illinois State Representative Lamont Robinson carried a ton of high-profile endorsements into the election and did just enough to secure a spot in the runoff against Prentice Butler, the chief of staff of former Alder Sophia King, or the soon-to-be former Alder Sophia King. Lamont Robinson got about 47% of the vote, and Butler about 15% of the vote. So I'm interested to see where that goes. Over just a few blocks south in the 5th Ward, Desmond Yancey and Martina Tina Hone have emerged as the top vote getters among the 9 others vying for retiring Alderman Leslie Harrison's long-held seat and the home of the future Obama Presidential Center. So they have just about 30 days to rally their neighbors. And Yancey got about 26% of the vote, while Hone got about 18%. So it still feels like it's anyone's race in the 5th. But I did want to
Totally
shine a little bit of light on the 14th Ward. So much attention has been focused on there because Ed Burke was the alderperson for 54 years, but that ward has changed over time. And now Helu Gutierrez will become the first new alder in this ward in half a century. And Gutierrez had the backing of former Congressman Chuy Garcia, as well as former House Speaker Mike Madigan. And so there's a new day in the 14th Ward. Simone, let's stay south, even though we're going to move further southeast. Can you tell us what's happening in the 10th Ward?
Yeah, as you said, far southeast side, sort of Hedgewish, east side, South Deering area. This is an open race, and so unsurprisingly, we're going to see a runoff there. Peter Chico came in as the top vote getter with 41%. He's a police officer who is running on a platform of public safety. And then Ana Guajardo came in second place with 27% of the vote. She has been endorsed by Chuy Garcia and the outgoing alderwoman, Susan Sadlowski Garza. So interested to see what happens in this ward where there are a lot of environmental issues among other things at play here.
Just it's worth noting, too, that both with the 14th and the 10th, these are majority Latino wards now that are seeing representation by Latinos. This was a big thing in the 14th with Burke. Like, this has long been a majority Latino ward, but it had been controlled by Burke. So, maybe the changing tides in representation.
And the 14th ward is on the far southwest
Correct.
side.
And then moving up a little bit into the 11th ward, one of those wards you mentioned, Jacoby, where we have a Lightfoot appointee headed to a runoff. This is sort of Bridgeport, Chinatown area. Alderwoman Nicole Lee is separated by just 17 votes from challenger Anthony Ciaravino, who is a police instructor.
Talk about your vote matters.
Yeah. If you are an 11th ward voter, really, really, really made a difference. They were neck and neck in this race. And Nicole Lee came in. She was appointed last year, and she also came in with the endorsement of former Mayor Richard M. Daley, the 11th ward. Historically, the seat of power for the Daley family. So and now the city's only Asian majority ward. And so that is also a changing ward, changing leadership as well. So will be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah. I just wanted to add my geographic details. The 4th ward, my ward, is the Hyde Park, Kenwood neighborhood. It kind of shoots up a little bit towards Bronzeville. The 5th ward, Woodlawn, South Shore, Greater Grand Crossing on the sort of southeast side. And then the 14th ward, now a majority Latino ward, is on the southwest side. Again, all of the aldermanic candidates who were appointed by Lori Lightfoot are headed to a runoff, except in the 12th ward, where Abarca was defeated by Julia Ramirez. Again, this is a southwest side ward, but Timmy Knutson on the north side, Monique Scott on the west side, and Nicole Lee, as Simone just mentioned, all headed to a runoff. Which, again, is interesting because I keep saying interesting. This is one of those, the 12th ward is one of the races we talked about specifically because Julia Ramirez didn't seek to get that appointee from Mayor Lori Lightfoot, wanted to keep her distance from the incumbent, and it seems to have paid off because she won in the 12th ward, while all of the other aldermanic appointees are facing some stiff competition. Carrie, I want to kick it back to you. You want to update us on the 26th and the 34th?
Sure. So 26 is actually right next to me. Kind of my former ward before the remap. This was long held by Roberto Maldonado. And so this would be, Humboldt Park, Logan Square, I think probably curves a little bit, maybe up into Belmont Cragen. So these are Northwest Side Latino neighborhoods that have been changing over, recent decades. Maldonado gave his endorsement to activists Jesse Fuentes, and Jesse Fuentes has really made keeping families in their homes in those neighborhoods, affordable housing. She really made that a central part of her campaign. 34th is such an example of how the ward remap changes our city. This was a far south side ward held by powerful Alderman Carrie Austin. Now it's West Loop, Greektown area. So it's like, what is the rhyme or reason on that? Well, that's a whole nother conversation about politics at play. And that is Bill Conway, who's a former prosecutor. He came in with a lot of money in that race against a commercial real estate developer. He beat him. And yeah, that's Bill Conway in the 34th in a area with a ton of development, and I think an important ward to watch because this is really one of the only contested races in the Loop area, which is going to be a big point that both the candidates are going to talk about. Bring business back to the Loop. The Loop is important. It's central to our city. So that's an interesting one to watch going forward.
From the near west side to the northwest side, the last ward we're going to check in on. I feel like we've been talking about this ward since CityCast Chicago came into existence. What's going on in the Jefferson Park area or the 45th ward, Simone?
Yeah, the reason we've been talking about this is because the incumbent alderman Jim Gardner has just faced a slew of controversies, allegations of everything from bribery to retaliation to harassment. But despite those allegations, he performed really, really well. He got 49% of the vote. That means he's still headed to a runoff against attorney Megan Mathias. this race, there were several challengers in this race who really wanted to like bring the ward together and sort of, very much trying to use Gardner's record and some of these issues against him. We will be interesting to see in a head-to-head contest if that plays out a little more and we're not splitting the vote across, 5 challengers, maybe if that comes across more, or it's possible Gardner keeps his job. He really strong showing from Gardner last night. So, anything could happen there too.
Yeah, going in, I assumed was definitely the most vulnerable. And yet it's a reminder, if you know your ward, if you know your constituency, then you can hang on and you can stay in office.
What looks vulnerable to the rest of us is different than if you live there,
Exactly.
Well, and it's also worth noting that the 45th ward in redistricting was remapped to include more parts of the very far northwest side, sort of Norwood Park, Forest Glen. Those areas do lean a little more conservative. And so that also might have helped Gardner in this.
Definitely.
The last thing that was on our ballot was the newly created police district councils. Quick reminder, each of Chicago's 22 police districts will get a 3-person civilian oversight council made up of people from that community for a total of 66 around the city. The hope is they will assert more civilian influence over Chicago Police Department through policy and personnel recommendations, nominate members of the Community Commission on Public Safety and Accountability, and host meetings directly with the community. This is a new office. Over 100 people were running. You can head to Hey Chicago at chicago.citycast.fm to get some more detailed information in neighborhoods like Austin, Inglewood, up at Rogers Park. But we will also drop links for you to get the full slate of candidates who were elected to this new body. And hopefully they will be able to bring, just a stronger sense of oversight, which people have been fighting for in our city for decades and decades. I want to thank producer Simone Alisea and lead producer Carrie Shepard for breaking down these election results this early in the morning. If you ever wondered how committed we were to our city, let this be an example. As we've been reminding you, head over to chicago.citycast.fm to read our Hey Chicago that has even more info about the election. Another 5 weeks of winter. Another 5 weeks of the election are ahead of us. I wish you both good luck in this runoff season.
Hey, man, we're in it together. We got this. Thanks, Jacoby.
I'm excited. I didn't know what you guys were talking about. I'm excited.
Before I let you go, some good news to get you through. One of Chicago's newest art galleries, Cherry Mountain Arts, is hosting a family day this Saturday, March 4th from 12 to 5 p.m. They'll have live coloring books, a reading nook for children, as well as a short film station. Stop by. Cherry Mountain Arts is located in Westtown. As always, we appreciate you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk to you then. Peace.
City politics, city elections, way better, way more fun.